Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and we're back with some more Warhammer 3 news. As expected, we now can look at the full roster for Tzeentch. Creative Assembly have released a rather lengthy blog post going into details regarding all the units, and we're going to check it out. We're going to look at anything. There's a lot of really important stuff here. So let's just take the time now to check things out. Before anything, there is an important note on the intro paragraph, which we generally don't cover, but it says here, as always, the below represents a game in progress. We're moving steadily towards our planned release in early 2022, but there's still plenty of tweaking to do. So at least we know that they're still moving on as planned. That's the most important thing. Now we're going to move on to Kairos Fateweaver, the legendary lord. There is no point covering his lore as, well, I've already done so in a previous video, but we're going to move on from the third paragraph onwards as there are some important bits of information. He, along every other unit in a Tzeentch army, comes with Barrier. This is a damage shield that regenerates quickly outside of combat and protects against all harm, acting as effectively another health bar. It makes hit and run attacks with flyers, plenty of those you'll notice below, and cavalry particularly effective, along with allowing you to cycle out your standard melee troops if applicable. It's also another area that can be buffed and altered through technology and skills, most of which are very powerful. So that's the little purple bar that a lot of us have noticed when they were showing off some stuff, and yeah, this makes sense. It's kind of like the Tzeentchian natural ward save that was on the tabletop. I like this, and it's actually quite good because, well, yeah, Tzeentchian demons are kind of squishy, so this is going to give them a little bit more survivability, which is going to be fairly important. You'll also notice that we don't have a lot of access to melee troops, so this is going to be what's keeping your troops alive. Now let's just take a quick look at the unique skills and abilities for Kairos before moving on to Lords, Heroes, and Units. Fragments of Magic allows Kairos to acquire and equip fragments of other spell lores, giving him access to several spells from that lore. Only one fragment can be equipped at a time. This is pretty cool, as in the tabletop he was always represented to having loads of different lores of magic, so this will allow him to switch out some lores and get a few spells. That's going to be quite fun, especially if you have a particular favorite lore. I'm assuming that this will only be allowed for the 8 battle lores, but who knows, they might surprise us. Staff of Tomorrow. Kairos' powerful artifact allows him to reduce all spell cooldowns in an instant. That does sound a little strong, but then again not unexpected because this is Kairos Fateweaver, one of the most powerful spellcasters in the Warhammer Fantasy universe. And lastly, Gaze of Fate. Paralyze a unit to prevent its movement and vastly drop their melee attack. This will be useful if you're fighting against stuff like Khorne, so yeah, sounds cool. We're going to move on to the Lord options now. First up we have the Exalted Lord of Change, which we're going to look at the artwork first. This is more reminiscent of that of the more recent tabletop model. Whereas I'm assuming the old Lord of Change will be the one that we've seen already in Warhammer 1. And I'm a big fan of the newer model. It is really imposing, it's very large. I like the art, I like the mini. I've painted about 1 or 2 of them, I think. Well, I've just checked, 1.5. I'll get to it eventually. Pile of shame aside, let's start looking towards the Lord of Change's text. A Lord of Change is hideously unpredictable and manipulative. Behind its gaze lies a curious and wrathful mind, deeply intelligent, yet as uncaring of consequence as it is fascinated by it. It is like a child playing upon some gigantic anthill, poking it with a stick at its inhabitants and laughing at the hopeless antics of their defense. Wow, that's pretty grim. Nothing pleases him more than to see the world broken and made anew, to redirect the course of a life or even history itself, spilling hope upon the ground while raising the ambition of others to an unexpected pinnacle of power. As well as being fierce melee combatants, Lords of Change are powerful spellcasters. Casting spells in a Tzeentch army fuels your ability to call upon the powers of the God of Magic. Special army abilities that are changed by the winds of magic seeing use, these powerful effects that can blitz enemies from the field with ease. And with every lord and plenty of heroes, even some standard units having access to spells are easy to exploit. We've already seen the faction mechanics, so we know that spells are going to be your main focus for Tzeentch, but then again, a basic understanding of the lore will also tell you that too. It's rather curious that they're known as fierce melee combatants though, because Big Bird was never that good at melee, but I guess they need to have something to be able to do some damage in melee combat should it get locked in, so yeah, it does make sense. Now, we are given a little bit of information regarding Tzeentch's unique spell lore, so let's check that out. Tzeentch's spellcasters specialize in either the lore of metal, with all the spells you're used to, and the lore of Tzeentch, which includes Blue Fire of Tzeentch, Pink Fire of Tzeentch, Treason of Tzeentch, Glean Magic, Tzeentch's Firestorm, and Infernal Gateway. This is a purely offensive spell with 4 spells that deal direct damage and the others debuffing enemies to their doom. You've now seen a selection of the new spell lores that we have coming in Total War Warhammer 3, and we'll be actually detailing these schools and their spells very soon. Okay, so we're going to get some spell blogs too. That's pretty cool, as I'm curious to see how these will work. I wonder if we're going to have to wait if they're all going to be done together, or if it's going to be individualized, because we still haven't seen Nurgle or Slaanesh yet. They're obviously going to have their own laws, and the pre-order incentive, be it Ogres or Chaos Dwarfs, which is going to likely be Ogres at this point, they're going to have their own spell lore too, so I'm assuming we're going to have to wait. The next Lord choice is of course the Herald of Tzeentch, and we're just going to check out the artwork very quickly. A pudgy little pink thing, and it looks adorable. Honestly, I've always loved these on the tabletop. They were a hero choice instead, but they were fun, and they look nice. I understand that a lot of people think that they're a bit too frumpy, but I think it's fine. Let's move on to the Herald of Tzeentch's text. As the magically fashioned slaves of Tzeentch, horrors are considered automatons to be expended as part of a carefully wrought plan. Should a servant of greater power be required, Tzeentch will create a herald, a more stable type of horror. Such demons have enough consciousness to direct others of their kind without constant guidance from a Lord of Change, directing furious sorcery against Tzeentch's enemies. To mount up, a Screamer must be transmuted into a new form before it can be safely used. These discs of Tzeentch retain the flattened and mantle-like shape of the sorcerer, but their magical bodies are transformed into unlikely shapes and aspects as part of the binding ritual. Heralds have little patience at the best of times, and none at all in training Screamers and discs. They therefore consider borrowing a chariot from an Exalted Flamer to be entirely in keeping with their status. Such a feat requires great cunning indeed, if the herald in question wishes to escape the Flamer's wrath. However, all these trials and tribulations seem as naught once the herald is free to swoop and dive across the battlefield on his new possession, cackling madly as he unleashes his fearsome sorceries upon the enemies of his dark god. Everything is Tzeentchian as expected. It's actually kind of funny. I quite like that. Now, spell lores is the lore of metal, the lore of Tzeentch as expected, and mounts we have the Disc of Tzeentch or Burning Chariot. So on foot he's going to be quite normal, but then with the Disc or Burning Chariot he's going to be incredibly mobile, and since we know that the spell lore of Tzeentch is going to be quite heavy damage based, and obviously then we've got the lore of metal which is quite damage based too, you're going to be quite powerful. Hopefully the Disc or the Burning Chariot doesn't make him too much of a big target, or else he'll get shot down fairly quickly, but again we're going to have to wait and see it when the gameplay eventually gets shown. We're done with the Lords, so let's move on to the heroes, and first we have the Cultist of Tzeentch. We're going to look at the artwork very quickly. It's cool. Honestly, I love the look. It's a new Tzeentchian cult, I imagine. I honestly do not recognize the look, so I'm assuming it must be completely new. I could be wrong, so if any of you do recognize this cult's look, let me know in the comments below, as I'm really trying to find it. Now let's look towards the text, and you guys might be surprised about this one. Tzeentchian cultists are a unique group. Clandestine worship of their god is more common, especially in Cathay, than the other gods, due to his secretive and manipulative nature. At the same time, interpreting their god's wishes is more challenging than for the straightforward Khorne or Slaanesh, where copious amounts of bodily fluids are usually enough. That's what she said. Strange masks, complicated rituals, and endless scheming and plotting mark the cultists. If anything, a chance to do the glory of their lord with a simple battle is preferable. Growing their cults and spreading the ways of Tzeentch is massively important, however. His schemes require sacrifices, blackmail, bribes, and most of all, knowledge. A cultist may work for years as a part of a machine he barely understands, even being convinced of his own failure and expecting the mutations that come with it. When the scheme succeeds on a wider scale, he cannot understand. They have unique access within the armies of Tzeentch to the Lore of Fire, making them a useful option for further battlefield damage and control. As they grow in power, they can also learn to summon demons direct from the realms of chaos, including Great Lords of Change themselves. While their time on the battlefield will be limited, their power is not. So this is really important, as Lore of Fire is unique to them. This means that obviously now you have access to 3 different lores of magic: Lore of Metal, Lore of Tzeentch, and Lore of Fire. If you like that lore, and I know it's fairly popular, now you've got access to it, which I think is going to make a lot of Tzeentch players happy. The idea of being able to summon in demons is going to be very interesting, even Lords of Change. So we know that this is a very heavily magic focused faction, and you're going to have a lot of winds of magic, especially if you know how to use the mechanics around. This is going to be really, really cool. Other than that, he's only got one mount option, which is the Chaos Steed, and yeah, I would have probably given him a flyer option too, but I guess just the steed is fine. He'll still be fairly mobile. The second hero we have is the Iridescent Horror, which we'll look at the artwork fairly quickly. Fun fact, this was actually the unit champion of the Pink Horrors of Tzeentch on the tabletop, but most of these unit champions have been elevated to hero status to allow for the Herald to be elevated to Lord. It looks cool, it looks pretty grim, and he looks fairly angry. Well, both of them do. There is not a lot of text, so let's just read that over before moving on to the units. Pink Horrors, collected magic as they are, can sometimes be granted capabilities beyond the norm, and the authority and sanity that comes with it. These iridescent horrors are masters of the magical arts and powerful combatants, proving the greater of even some champions. Their deadly skills are enhanced further with locust magics that allow them to greatly buff their allies at a moment's notice, or summon more through portals to the Chaos Realms. They have the Laws of Metal or Tzeentch, and the mount options are Discs of Tzeentch or Burning Chariots, but it seems that they'll also have some other skills too, being able to buff up their units and summon in some more. It'll be cool to see them as a multi-purpose unit, because there'll be buffers and spellcasters. This should be fairly interesting, and obviously it does make sense to have a lot of summoners within Tzeentch's army, because I'm assuming if you get close up in combat and you get stuck there, you are gonna die. We can now start moving on to the Tzeentchian infantry, and first up we have the Blue Horrors of Tzeentch, little blue angry jelly babies. The artwork looks nice for what it is, and we always expected them to be somewhat a infantry unit. I was expecting missile infantry, it kind of makes sense, but I guess they need some frontline chaff to just hold down the enemy, so yeah, that's fine. Blue Horrors are sullen and malicious, like evil-tempered children, and sneer and grumble their way through a battle. Once spawned, they add a deeper, widening note to the incessant chortling of the group, as they attempt to grapple with enemies and squeeze the life from them, before inevitably wandering off in search of fresh entertainment. It sounds like fun. Notable characteristics. While classed as melee troops, as that's where their proficiency lies, Blue Horrors are capable of vomiting up magical fire. This gives them an impressive first punch on a charging enemy. Oh, so I'm assuming like a bounce spell? Which, yeah, that's cool. As long as you're able to do some damage and then jump in, that sounds awesome. Now next, all demons suffer from instability when their morale is low, making them begin to disintegrate on the spot rather than flee from battle. Yeah, we kinda expected this. And lastly, despite their pathetic stature when compared to more senior demons, Blue Horrors are still a fearsome sight for the mortals of the world, gibbering mouths and flailing deadly limbs. So yeah, basic frontline infantry with a bounce spell presumably to be able to do some damage before actually getting into the front of it. So yeah, this sounds quite cool. I'm actually quite excited for these. Hopefully they won't be too squishy, but they kind of look squishy. And lastly, for melee infantry, we have the Forsaken of Tzeentch. Yes, I know this has probably popped up a few questions, and don't worry, I've got a statement from Creative Assembly. Many warriors of chaos find that the rewards of the gods turn out to more closely resemble afflictions than blessings. In time, many Forsakens lose any capacity for rational thought, setting aside sophisticated weaponry in favor of jagged teeth and twisted claws. They have no intelligence glinting within their black eyes, for their minds churn with nothing more than thoughts of killing and devouring anything they can catch. These atavistic warriors often bear ever-twisting assortments of mutations, including writhing tentacles, chitinous claws, extra heads, and hairy, grasping limbs that push out through their armor. Their notable characteristics are as follows: one of very few dedicated melee-only ground units in Tzeentch's roster, and vital for holding early battles in campaign. The madness of the Chaos Realms and the infection of their bodies makes Forsaken immune to psychology but liable to frenzy. Given their high armor, compared to almost everything else on the Tzeentch roster, you're going to get a lot of use out of Forsaken, depending on your playstyle anyway. Yeah, Forsaken, always expected, we've seen them in screenshots and so on, and I must say, they're a cool unit. I like them for the Chaos Warriors normally. The only thing I would really change, and I've spoken about this in a previous video, is that they should be unbreakable, as they're gonna need something to hold down the line, and I don't think Blue Horrors are gonna be able to do that much, so it would be nice if they could just be unbreakable, considering heavy mutations from Tzeentch. It just kinda makes sense. But with all that being said, that's all the basic melee units, and you might be wondering why we're not moving on to the Tzeentch missile infantry just yet. Well, obviously some former screenshots did show off the Chaos Chosen Tzeentchian units, yet they're not in this roster. Now, I did reach out to Creative Assembly, as obviously they supplied this document early in advance, and apparently the Chaos Chosen were never intended to be part of this roster. Apparently it's supposed to be a mounted unit that was left without its mount when the screenshots were taking place. Yeah, I don't know, it sounds a bit strange to me, and it's a shame because the Chosen would have had a bit of extra oomph to the ground units, because we're really lacking them at the moment. But take that as you will, but let's move on now to the Tzeentch missile infantry, as we do have a few things to discuss. First, let's look at the artwork for the basic pink horror. There are of course two, and both of them are going to be missile infantry units, but it looks like they'll be decent at doing some melee damage too. Now, they look cool, I like the look of them. I do prefer the one with the horns more because it looks a bit more grim, though yeah, it's still very nice artwork, it's good concept art. Moving on to the descriptions, pink horrors are identified by their luminescent pink skin and their squeals of high-pitched laughter. Spellcasting fills them with joy, and they emit a special merriment as eldritch energy screeches from their upraised hands. When wounded, a pink horror exhales a final lunatic cackle before rapidly decomposing. Notable characteristics are as follows: vomiting burning hellfire spells magical fiery doom for most other low-tier units. Also boast greater melee capabilities than their blue cousins, making them a useful hybrid unit, gibbering delighted buffoons, which I personally feel a distinct connection with. This is Ben, the blog writer, not myself. I'm more Soneshi, thank you. But with all that being said, yeah, that looks cool, and they're going to be a hybrid unit, so that's not too bad. We're at least going to have hybrids out of this. I know a lot of people are a bit like, wait, where is the blue horror stuff? And unfortunately there's no mention if they can turn into blue horrors, which is a bit of a shame as that's really embedded into their lore. It would be nice to see a pink horror die and then turn into two blue horrors, but I guess it's not mechanically possible? Or they're just leaving some surprises out until the game gets released, which would make sense. Who knows? Next we have the Exalted Pink Horrors of Tzeentch, very much the same as the others, but a lot more demonistic. Few more horns and all that, and they look cool. I like the concept art, it's pretty. I'm imagining that they'll also be a hybrid unit too, or at least I'm hoping so, because Tzeentch kinda needs a little bit more frontline. Pink horrors that have proven sufficiently powerful, cunning, or mad, and survived many battles, not to mention the raucous random happenings of their home dimension, may become exalted. They wear golden trappings and consider themselves first among the lower servants of Tzeentch. Quite how much actual respect, or even knowledge, other higher demons are paying to them is unknown. The ever higher pitch of their excited squeals means at least they're having a good time. Notable characteristics are as follows. A further upgrade in all forms over the pink horrors. Okay, yeah, so they will be a melee hybrid range unit. Their concentrated warp fire will outdamage even the celestial dragon crossbows of Grand Cafe. And finally, their delight at magic and desire to see it increases Winds of Magic recharge rate for the army, stacking with each unit. Okay, this is really cool. So some of you might not know, but pink horrors could get you more Winds of Magic when you played them on the tabletop. I'm referring to Warhammer Fantasy Battles. I'm not sure if you could do that in 40k, but this is a really, really nice throwback to the tabletop stuff, and I'm all for it. Next we have the Chaos Knights of Tzeentch, and no artwork unfortunately, so let's just jump right in. Knights of Tzeentch are feared throughout the Old World and beyond as merciless butchers capable of turning the course of battle with a single charge. Well, only if the beta actually works. Sorry. They are towering brutes atop immensely powerful chaos steeds, ponies you mean, rider and mount clad in thickest plate, each section of armor crafted by a master demonsmith. A little mention to the chaos dwarfs there, as that's what the demonsmiths are. Let's carry on. A knight's greaves are jagged blades, well suited to slicing through the flesh of the enemy. Even the frightful reputation of the Knights of Tzeentch is a weapon in its own right, crippling those who would stand against them before a single blow is struck. Notable characteristics are as follows: lack the massive impact charge of standard cavalry, but are far more effective in a pitched battle. Heavily armored, unlikely to flee, and fast to strike, causing fear with their thunderous charge. They literally just said before that they don't have a massive impact charge and now it's thunderous. It's confusing. And finally, the addition of a Tzeentch barrier to the power of Chaos Knights makes them absolute tanks. Well, we're gonna have to wait and see when we finally get to see possibly Nurgle Knights. Either way, other than the whole conflicting section and the notable characteristics, Knights of Tzeentch were actually really popular on the tabletop, so I guess that makes sense that they're going to be in this roster too. Next we have the Doom Knights of Tzeentch. Unfortunately no artwork either, which is a shame as I was really hoping to get a little bit of a better look at them. But the text is as follows. Doom Knights are some of the most powerful mortals the world has ever seen, taming discs of Tzeentch, and thus consider themselves superior to even other champions of chaos. Screeching through the air like few before them, they would be a wondrous sight to behold if their coming did not always spell death. And, as is their namesake, Doom, there is no escape from the Doom Knights, and they show no mercy. Discs are the demonic steeds of Tzeentch. These bizarre creations are neither demon nor construction, but a nightmarish blend of the two. Coruscating with mystical force, discs fly above the ground, skimming gently forwards upon the winds of magic. The discs themselves are far from defenseless, lashing out around themselves with bolts of magical fire, or manifesting whirling tentacles and ripping claws to slash at enemies that approach too close. Notable characteristics are as follows: flying shock cavalry that are more than a match for any foe. Trade their ground-born cavalry allies' armor and defense for vastly superior speed and power, the strongest melee-focused unit in Tzeentch's arsenal. So I guess you're going to replace the cavalry as soon as you can with these guys, which of course makes sense, they are flying too, and flying units can be very useful, especially if they're going to be able to pack a punch, which this very much suggests. Next we have the Burning Chariot of Tzeentch, and we get some nice concept art for it, so we can also see what the discs of Tzeentch look like, as the discs themselves are normally pulled by screamers. And it looks cool. I like the design style, it's pretty, it's one of those things where you wanted to paint back in the day on the tabletop, but painting yellow was such an issue that you normally just painted it gold. The description, however, is as follows. Burning chariots of Tzeentch hurtle across the realms of chaos like incandescent meteors, bringing the great sorcerer's chosen emissaries to every corner of existence. As they blaze through the heavens of the mortal world, chariots of Tzeentch are commonly mistaken for comets, which are in turn interpreted as omens of great events and terrible wars. The discs and screamers which make up the bizarre chariot are drawn to raw magic like moths to a flame, and therefore to Exalted Flamers, who exude tasty sorcery from every pore and wrinkle of their fungoid flesh. Notable characteristics are as follows. The range power of an Exalted Flamer, as is mounted on the Burning Chariot, is the strongest anywhere in the world, more than even siege weaponry. Oh, this sounds pretty tasty. The next point, such are the devastating energies being pulled from the warp by the Exalted Flamer, it will run out of power quickly, at which point it must contest with foes in melee, so I'm guessing it'll have extremely limited ammo. The combination of extremely fast, very powerful area attacks that can fly out of harm's way with ease is potent. Okay, so pretty cool. So this is a chariot. Many of us know how to use chariots, but this is a flying chariot, which means that it should be able to get in and out without a problem. This bodes well for the future, because if they can make this work, then High Elves should be able to get Lothan Skycutters. I wonder how strong the range firepower it is. They say it's even stronger than siege weaponry, so it could potentially hit walls, maybe? Next, we're moving on to monsters and beasts, and the first one is the Chaos Furies of Tzeentch. We kind of guessed that everyone's going to get Furies at this point, and no artwork, but then again, we've already seen them in the trailers. Furies are yowling shards of malevolent energy, chaos in its purest form. With little in the way of intelligence, they are utterly subservient to the whims of the Dark Gods, and shift in aspect and power as the balance of the Dark Pantheon alters. They are easily subjugated by other demons, whom they regard with a mix of dread and awe. Furies swarm at the edges of the battle, avoiding the thickest fighting if they can. Only when they sight a vulnerable victim do they descend, a wailing mass from which there can be no escape. Notable characteristics are as follows. These Furies trade the Frenzy of Khorne for the Barrier of Tzeentch, so they're going to have a bit of an extra defense line there. This makes them far more effective as hit-and-run units, and a natural first step before Screamers and Doom Knights can enter the fray, a cheap and effective unit for counterattacks, flanks, especially when given their Vanguard deployment. I'll be honest, I'm not too fussed about Furies, but at least these ones will be a bit more tankier, as obviously the barrier will keep them alive for a bit longer, and it might help Tzeentchian forces a little bit. Next we have the Screamers of Tzeentch, no art unfortunately, so let's jump into the text. Screamers are glimmering sky sharks that ride upon the winds of magic as a bird glides upon the breeze. They roam the tides of magic, preying upon the shadow souls of mortal creatures, lone chaos furies, and other unfortunate magical ephemera. Once the Screamers catch their doomed prey, it is torn to pieces in a blink of an eye. The gossamer shreds of its soul offered up as a gift to Tzeentch. So swift and agile are Screamers that they are highly sought after as steeds. However, their instinctive nature swiftly proves calamitous should their controller's attention wander. Their notable characteristics are as follows. Lightweight and unarmored, they are still powerful once locked in melee combat, acting as Tzeentch's equivalent of early cavalry. Must be quickly moved in and out of combat to exploit the barrier and their charge bonuses to its fullest. A giant flying blue sky shark that lets out a hearty scream at every opportunity. Who among us can't identify? We really need to check up to see if Ben's doing okay. I'm pretty sure working from home is losing his mind. Other than that, Screamers are cool. Like, they're one of my absolute favorite units to use on the tabletop, especially when you get to play around with demons, or if you're using a mixed list of warriors and, of course, demons, and they were just obviously really fun. On the tabletop, they were a bit past the early cavalry phase, so I hope that they can stay relevant for later game, because, well, I just really like them, so being able to buff them up will be cool. Next we have the Spawn of Tzeentch. Again, no artwork, but we've seen them in the trailers. A creature visited by too many gifts of the Dark Gods inevitably succumbs to madness and mutation, and becomes a Chaos Spawn. A once humanoid form that has sprouted and burst into an obscene and monstrous anatomy, mutated beyond recognition. The eyes of the original creature peer out, a glint of its former personality, barely perceptible amidst the fleshy ruins. Chaos Spawn are creatures of unspeakable horror, their twisted bodies sporting an impossible array of spines, eyes, and mouths. The notable characteristics are as follows. Another of Tzeentch's rare melee-dedicated land units, though trading armor for power. A low model count and lack of defenses makes this a tricky unit to hold the line with, but with their powerful blows and pure ferocity, make them a unique part of Tzeentch's roster. Sort of like land-based Screamer, psychology, same. It would have been cool if they could have also had some sort of bound range attack. Nothing too powerful, but something short range would be nice. But the Chaos Spawn themselves work rather well. They're also unbreakable, so it's something that you want to have, and if you can buff them up, that is, because in some rosters they don't do so well after a while. Next are the generic Lords of Change. These are the monster versions, not the Lord. As might be expected, a creature born of pure magic and bound to the will of the Master of Sorcery, a Lord of Change is a potent spellcaster. The winds of magic obey his every command, allowing him to summon whirling tempests of change and mutation, blast the enemies of Tzeentch with bolts of multicolored fire, or unravel the mind of an enemy spellcaster from the inside. Although a Lord of Change elects to use magic and trickery to further its ends, he is still a fearsome fighter. Countless heroes have underestimated these strange creatures, thinking their wiry frames and fluttering wings fragile. Notable characteristics are as follows: a fully fledged spellcaster and devastating single entity monster, and flyer all in one, handy, affordable bird-shaped package. can gain even more and more powerful spells from various campaign technologies, won't go toe-to-toe with a Bloodthirster, but is still plenty powerful enough to lay waste to mortal formations. So it can cast spells too, that's great and expected. I wonder if this will act as bounce spells or it'll tap into the Winds of Magic. Most likely bounce spells, because Winds of Magic tend to be quite limited. I imagine that even with Tzeentch's special Winds of Magic generating mechanics, there will be some lack there. But we're going to have to wait and see. Now, I'm surprised that this is still going to be considered quite powerful. I mean, they weren't that strong on the tabletop, and I use tabletop a lot of reference, but yeah, I can see it killing off a few units of greatswords. Maybe one or two? Next, we have the Flamers of Tzeentch. We've got the artwork here. We don't really need to look at it much as there was a spotlight, and yeah, it looks pretty grim, doesn't it? The Flamers seem to be one of the very few demons which actually look like they're directly from your nightmares, which is a good thing, it really is. Their description is as follows. Flamers are capable of a fair turn of speed, expelling gaseous ichor through the fungoid skirts as their base to bound and leap across the ground with considerate mischievous gusto. A Flamer uses its blazing limbs to hurl bolts of magical flame at the foe. This is not fire in its truest sense, but a rolling cloud of chaos energy. It does not burn, but warps reality. A Flamer's victim might briefly feel invigorated before collapsing into a writhing puddle of flesh. Hey, look, they used the same quote from the army book as I did. Its notable characteristics are as follows. While not on the same level as Exalted Flamers, ground-bound or mounted standard Flamers, oh, they can be both, still output a ludicrous amount of damage and operate as small groups rather than solo. Much like Pink Horrors, will need careful placement to assure maximum damage, but can annihilate when placed correctly. As a later game powerful monster unit, can still hold their own in melee combat, especially after applying a few burns to their victims. They can also warp fire in melee, making any supportive fire very effective. So we're getting two different types, and this is actually something quite curious that I've only just noticed. We don't have any clarification as to what weapons certain units will use, how many variants there'll be, and so on. It's very weird. It's different to all the other roster reveals for some reason. Next we have the Exalted Flamer of Tzeentch, which we have the artwork here. It's very different, a little goofy I must say. Don't get me wrong, this isn't a bad thing. It's obviously a Flamer with more avian features to follow that of Tzeentch as a exalted demon, but I don't know, the face is just kind of funny. Its description, however, is as follows. A Flamer uses its blazing limbs to hurl bolts of magical flame at the foe. I've just realized they've copy-pasted a bunch of this, so let's move on to actual unique text. The Exalted Flamers are able to channel magical flame to a far greater extent than their lesser brethren, and can conjure up great billowing sheets of warp magic, or hurl bolts of sorcerous change that make the very air sizzle with their passing. Their notable characteristics are as follows, likely to be the most powerful ranged attack on the battlefield, including siege weapons. Spray warp fire in a cone, making them extra deadly against formations or single entities. The Warp Flame debuff increases damage taken from fire attacks, strengthening almost the entire Tzeentchian army against the target. Low ammunition means they'll inevitably end up in close combat. They don't excel, but they will hold their own. Okay, so I'm assuming that we also have a variant of this on foot, as we do have them on a chariot. What is confusing to me is that the majority of the damage from Tzeentch's fire attacks, it should be magical, I think? Yeah, I've just had a quick look at the Demon Army book, and they're magical attacks, not flaming. I'm not too sure why they've done it like this, but I guess it's to be better against the dwarfs? But then again, wouldn't that be the dwarfs' only way to combat demons? Yeah, we're going to need clarification on this, that and it's been a long day. So let's move on to the final unit. The Soul Grinder of Tzeentch. Yeah, so we kind of expected this when we saw the Khorne one. We've already seen this one in trailers too, so yeah, that's all cool. Now, the Soul Grinder, it's got a bit more of an avian feature and so on, so it gives me hope that we're going to see some differences when we see possibly a Slaaneshi one and a Nurgle one. At least I can hope. Its description is as follows. When a demon's physical body is slain, he can surrender his true name to the Forge of Souls. The dark bargain thus sealed, his crippled essence is bound to a mighty warp metal hulk. Thus is he reborn as a Soul Grinder. A Soul Grinder's clanking tread shakes the ground with every step, and is devilishly fast for a creature its size. Able to scuttle swift as a horse's gallop, or even faster should the scent of battle touch its nostrils. Piston-driven legs thud home with sickening force. crushing to bloody paste those beneath, and its notable characteristics are as follows. Compared to its soul grinder friends and other factions, Tzeentch hurls a long-range, anti-large set of magic spears at any target. Awesome, so it's got an anti-large attack. And it's long range too, so this is going to be quite interesting versus, say, Bloodthirsters. Magical attacks ensure maximum damage along armor piercing. Sweet. Blue, which is a cool color. Seriously, we need to check if Ben's fine. Plus, it's kind of blue and pink. Either way, the roster is pretty cool. I quite like Tzeentch's roster. I still want to know what exact variants we're getting. Like, for example, are the knights just coming with lancers? Are they going to have hand weapons? It would be nice to know. But it looks like Tzeentch is getting some powerful units and a lot of fast-moving stuff. This is going to be really interesting to see. Normally, that was kind of Slaaneshi on the tabletop, so it's going to be strange to see this with Tzeentch. And I wonder what they're going to do to Slaanesh to make it differentiate. But other than that, this looks pretty cool. What do you guys think? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and let's start a bit of the discussion. I want to see what you guys feel about Tzeentch's forces. But with that, my friends, we've come to the end of our video. Thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy the video, might I suggest giving the video a like, or even subscribing to the channel, as it really does help us out. In the description section below are various links to different social media platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, and Discord. Also in the description section is an affiliate link with Element Games where you could buy loads of hobby-based products, not just Warhammer, for 10 to 25% off. Making a purchase using that link and also our special code, which is also in the description, supports the channel at no extra cost to you, which we think is rather cool. A big thank you to our patrons. Your support means the world to us. It's amazing that people want to help a small channel like us grow and get to a higher level of content. A big thank you to Gibraltar LUSC, Ryan Bertsche, Andrew Prince, and Okro for subscribing to us at our Fane level. You guys are super cool. And a big thank you to Edward Yule, VS Vasan, Aaron Whitman, and Shaggy for subscribing to us at our King level. Honestly, we can't thank you all enough. And lastly, a big thank you to all of you for liking, sharing, and commenting on these videos. Honestly, it's because of you guys that the channel's been growing at such a great pace lately, so we can't thank you all enough. But with that, my friends, thank you so much for watching once again, and we shall see you all again very, very soon. Have a good day.